Okay, so we're seeing more attendees coming in. So let's start. Okay, so good day to everyone. I hope everyone is well. So in this talk, I have Rodolfo with me. I'm Paul, and we're part of Trend Micro's threat team. So ransomware, as we all know, is getting more complex with more advanced tactics than ever before. Companies are starting to feel the impact worldwide that the need for a robust cybersecurity infrastructure is crucial in day-to-day operations. This talk will not only showcase threat solutions, but also will get into detail on what we want you to do to stay protected. Okay. Okay, so most of us have heard about ransomware, but what makes it so lucrative? Ransomware is a billion-dollar cybercriminal industry where threat actors hold your assets hostage in exchange for money. These assets can be your intellectual property or equipment needed for operations. So where and when did ransomware become a threatening incident? Let's go back 15 years ago. In 2005, we see the rise of encryption-related ransomware in Russia. The threat zipped specific files with the password and a ransom worth $300 was required. Fast forward 6 years later, SMS ransomware and MBR ransomware are observed. Until this day, we see threats that still target the master boot record. It is during this decade that ransomware is being observed in Europe and in the Americas already. By 2013, we are seeing ransomware that uses blended capabilities and leveraging legitimate tools such as PowerShell. In 2016, we see the rise of ransomware threats on a global scale. Multiple variants are observed. Notable threats are Locky and Petya, which damaged a lot of computers worldwide. In 2017, a global outbreak of WannaCry happened, which even alerted Microsoft to release emergency patches for end-of-life Windows products, such as Vista, XP, and Server 2003. This was only 3 years ago, and WannaCry is still observed in certain regions. So what's new in 2020? At the start of the decade, ransomware attacks now involve targeted schemes, legitimate tool usage, and exploiting vulnerabilities. They start to target high value assets or companies which impact the production. Take Ryuk as an example, a targeted attack that hampered the operation of multiple enterprises. 2020 shows that ransomware attacks are now more targeted. Not only they target high value assets, but they also disclose them to the public. With the recent Maze infection, a company in the tech industry was reported to have their files disclosed by the threat actors. Threat actors behind Netwalker took advantage of the COVID-19 situation and infected a lot of healthcare providers worldwide. It is also this decade where we see the influx of spam mail brought about by the SARS-CoV-2 outbreak. COVID related spam increased by 220% during the first quarter of this year. Threat actors take advantage of the pandemic by bundling spam with threats such as Emotet and TrickBot, which are responsible for the real ransomware. And according to the reports from the FBI, targeted multiple healthcare entities. During this pandemic, we see more people or study from home. This brought the surge of users. So Microsoft released 100 patches for vulnerabilities each month. If you can recall, WannaCry used the SMB version 1 vulnerability, for which many people are still vulnerable until this day. Another vulnerability is zero logon, which allows a threat actor to execute ransomware. Ransomware infection rates have decreased over the years. However, again, their tactics now involve high value assets and damaging corporate properties. This led to a 66 increase in percent increase in ransomware demand in just a span of a quarter. Now let me take you to Rodolfo as he'll be showing ransomware attack simulation and their tactics and how it can damage your enterprise. Okay, Rodolfo, I'll be giving you the control to you.
Thank you for that, Paul. Hi everyone, Rod here. Now we're about to show you a simulation of a ransomware attack. Take note that this simulation that we're going to show you is already past the exposure layer. Exposure layer covers machines that have services opened or exposed to public, like a web server or a DNS server. These are the usual entry point of a targeted attack, which are compromised usually through brute forcing the RDP credentials, exploiting open and vulnerable services or applications, and many more. So let's start the simulation video. So on a compromised web server, a zipped folder containing the ransomware and toolset that will be used for the attack has been downloaded by the threat actor. This toolset usually contains tools used for attack techniques like reconnaissance, machine enumeration, credential dumping, lateral movement, exploitation, and so on. Initially, threat actors need to acquire privileged credentials to use for lateral movement. So, a password dumper tool would be used. One popular password dumper tool is the Mimikatz. Mimikatz has many functionalities, but the most known is its capability to dump passwords from memory in clear text format, like the one being shown in this video simulation. And as we can see here, the credentials are dumped. Some are encrypted, but there are those that are in clear text format as well. So what does this mean? Even if users or administrators have set their password to a complex and long password, it still can be compromised like this one for the domain administrator. Threat actors also uses legitimate tools for attacks, like the advanced port scanner, which can be used for machine enumeration or host discovery, discovering all active hosts on the network and mapping them to their IP addresses. It can also do port scanning to identify open ports or services on the network, which will help them list all machines that can be exploited and infected. The activity done has now included the network layer part. Usually, threat actors will look for important machines on the network, like the domain controllers. And of course, what best machine to move laterally into than the domain controller server, right? So once the necessary domain controller server information has been obtained, the threat actor is now ready to laterally move or RDP into this domain controller. And after the domain controller has been accessed, threat actor continues to probe the network for scoping of machines to attack using probing tools as well, like advanced port scanner. And then once this scanning is finished, the list of available machines probed will be exported and then acquired, which will be used later on for further infection. There are many things that can be done on a compromised domain controller. One we are seeing that is now becoming a popular method of an attack is the deployment of the ransomware via Active Directory. A logon script containing commands to execute the ransomware hosted on a shared location like a file server will be deployed to every machines on the domain via group policy object or GPO. And once the user of those machines with the new group policy have logged on, the ransomware will be executed automatically. And after the information needed are acquired from the domain controller, the ransomware the can now be executed here as well, like what was being shown here on the simulation. Threat actors also deletes event logs to hide their tracks. This can be done manually or automatically through scripts. This is important to them, making mitigation and investigation of the attack harder. And after the ransomware finishes encrypting the files, it will display the ransom note and drop multiple copies of ransom note on the encrypted location to alert the user of the ransomware infection. Now, the threat actor is moving laterally to another machine acquired from the advanced port scanner to as well compromise it and run the ransomware. Event logs are also deleted again to hide their tracks. These activities are done on what we call the user layer. So what are the effects of having the files encrypted? Main effect is that the file will now be rendered useless, meaning it cannot be opened or accessed anymore, unless you acquire the private key pair of the public key used for the encryption. And unfortunately, this private key is only available in the hands of the threat actors. For some, these encrypted files just appear to have the original files appended with another extension, right? But even if you remove this appended extension and return the files to their original file name, it still cannot be opened or accessed due to it already been encrypted. And then lastly, on the patient zero, event logs are also cleared, which makes it hard to identify how this machine got initially compromised. Then ransomware is also run. So you may be wondering, how is Trend Micro addressing these types of attacks? Trend Micro have proactive solutions such as behavior monitoring and predictive machine learning. So behavior monitoring focuses on what the file does rather than the file itself. So if a file that was run has a malicious behavior, it will be detected even if there's no signature file pattern yet. Behavior monitoring have features specifically designed for ransomware detection, which makes it one of our main solutions for ransomware. So let's see it in action. So here, we executed the ransomware file, and since it has a malicious behavior, it got detected and terminated with a violation of malicious behavior, unlike on the simulation where it successfully ran and encrypted the files on the system. Another proactive feature that Trend Micro has is the predictive machine learning. So in this simulation, as we can see, once the SIFT file has been extracted, the ransomware got detected and cleaned. Predictive machine learning uses artificial intelligence or AI to correlate threat information and perform in-depth file analysis to detect unknown security risks. In fact, many cases involving ransomware files are already detected by predictive machine learning prior to the actual incident. Deep security also has detection for reconnaissance. In the simulation video shown earlier, threat actor ran the advanced port scanner for reconnaissance. This is detected by Deep Security's firewall, where you can see which machine is doing the port scanning and blocks its traffic for a configured amount of time. Trend Micro Solutions' new solution is called XDR, which is cross-layered detection response. XDR collects and correlates detection and deep activity data across multiple security layers such as email, endpoint, server, cloud workloads, and network, providing administrators and analysts with the correct and crucial data to be analyzed and focused on, relieving them of being overloaded with the analysis of tons of data needed in a short amount of time. So if you recall from the ransomware attack simulation shown earlier, the Mimikatz tool was used for password dumping. And in this case, that event was logged by the agent and was analyzed by XDR. Then it matched a detection model, giving us detection for this technique. Now let's check out what can be seen by XDR from our simulation. So going to the XDR workbench, we can see a detection of credential dumping. Clicking the workbench ID gives us more information of the event. Here, we can see the machine which had the credential dumping activity and also the file involved, which is the Mimikatz. Then, if you recall, the threat actor also have RDP to another machine after doing the credential dumping. XDR also correlates these events and gives a detection of lateral movement after credential dumping. Here we can see which machine have done the dumping and the lateral movement, which is the web server. So that's it for the Trend Micro solution coverage of our ransomware attack. There are a lot of other TTPs also covered by XDR, like spear phishing attacks, file deobfuscation, Kerber roasting, and many more. Imagine if you have these attacks present on your network and these security features on the endpoint level, which are supposedly the last line of defense, are not enabled, definitely the attack would be successful. So, ransomware threat landscape is becoming more advanced and sophisticated, where traditional solutions are not enough to cover them anymore. Credential dumping, privilege escalation, lateral movement, defense evasion, and data exfiltration are just some of the tactics and techniques that are common now with these targeted attacks deploying ransomware. So here are some of the tactics and techniques and procedures, or what we call TTPs, of famous ransomwares that are deployed by targeted attacks. First, we got here the crisis, phobos or dharma, threat actors that are known to compromise a system through RTP exposed to public. Web servers and DNS servers that are exposed to public are the initial machines that are compromised, which we call the patient zero. These are done through RDP credential spraying, brute forcing, or through stolen RDP credentials. Then for the execution phase, the malwares are usually executed through user execution, scheduled tasks, or sometimes a PowerShell PS1 script named toolkit.ps1. For the privilege escalation, the threat actors compromise administrator accounts, either local or domain admins. Defense evasion is a pretty common technique from targeted attacks. This aims to evade detection, thus disabling or uninstalling anti-malware solution is one of the main goals. They use malicious tools as well as legitimate tools like Gmer, Revo uninstall that operates on the kernel level, thus having the capability to disable the anti-malware solution. Event logs clearing are seen as well, of course, to remove their tracks, similar to what was shown earlier in the simulation. Executing their activities on the network requires some privileges, so having administrator privileges is important. Popular tools like Mimikatz, Lasagne, and NetPass or Network Password Recovery are used to achieve this. For the discovery part, crisis group are seen to be using the legitimate tool NetScan for discovering the machines on the network. Lateral movement consists of techniques that threat actors use to enter and control remote systems on the network, which often involves pivoting through multiple systems and accounts to gain before reaching their objective. So lateral movement via RDP is common, but we are also seeing installation of backdoor and drum. And then lastly, for the impact, ransomware is run and files are encrypted. Next is the Sodinokibi. Most of the techniques are the same, but there are some differences, which we have highlighted in orange, like the use of the PS1, custom PS1, and security removal tools. The threat actors research for and specifically know which anti-malware solution the target customer has and uses the uninstall tool or creates a specific script to disable or uninstall these solutions. Another difference is the use of Kerber roasting technique for credential access, which abuses a valid Kerberos granting ticket or snips the network for the ticket granting service. Basically, once a service ticket that is weakly encrypted is obtained via these procedures, this can now be brute forced offline using tools like Hashcat and expose the plain text credential. And then lastly, for the impact, ransomware encryption is not the only extent of the activity of these threat actors. Some groups also exfiltrates data before encrypting them and then threatens to expose this data publicly if the victims don't pay the ransom. Next in the list is the infamous Ryuk ransomware. This ransomware is known to be deployed through other malwares. First, Emotet, which provides malware as a service or MAAS to other threat groups, infects the system, usually through spam download stream. which will lastly download the Ryuk ransomware. Another MAAS or malware as a service named Bazaar has also been seen recently to download the Ryuk ransomware. Next is Netwalker. Netwalker, also known as Mailto, have recently adopted the ransomware as a service or RAAS model. It is known for its fileless loading for defense evasion, hosting a PowerShell script, which is the ransomware, on a remote location and is called remotely on victim machines across the domain using logon scripts. And then last on the list of the famous ransomware is the Maze ransomware. Maze initially used exploit kits and spam campaigns to infect its victim, but later began using known security vulnerabilities and web shell to specifically target big name companies. For privilege escalate, they create new accounts to use. And similar to Pobos, they use multiple third-party tools to disable anti-malware solutions. Tools like Bloodhound and Pincastle are also used for credential access. Advanced IP scanner, predefined, and customized bat file are used for discovery. These are just some of the tactics and techniques threat actors use during targeted attacks. Knowing these TTPs and solutions against them is now essential and important in securing your organization. And to give you more information, Paul will further elaborate Trend Micro's security solutions. Back to you, Paul.
Okay, Rodolfo, thank you for that sharing and your insights on tactics, techniques, and procedures. Okay, so with that discussed, so now that we are aware of what ransomware can do, how do we fortify our defenses? So having your patterns updated, of course, is necessary, but it's not enough. So let's take what other solutions we have in store for you. So let's take a look at the behavior monitoring and its related features. Behavior monitoring is an advanced threat detection module capable of checking for anomalies within the system. Behavior monitoring has several capabilities that allows for a comprehensive threat protection. One of its capabilities is to check for suspicious behaviors in the system, such as accessing core operating system components, read-write activities on common malware locations, and checking and creation of suspicious services. Exploit detection checks if the program is being compromised and used maliciously. Fileless malware detection checks for an advanced type of threat that only relies on being executed on system memory. Ransomware behavior detection checks for programs with ransomware-like execution such as file modification. Unauthorized change prevention prevents key operating system components as well as agent components from being modified. Now let's take a look at ransomware protection. So this leverages behavior monitoring capabilities by checking for ransomware-like execution chains. As you can recall, majority of ransomware relies on encrypting the files. With those common indicators, access document control monitors file encryption and modification activity, then terminates the process once it detects it. If file encryption is detected, damage recovery engine initiates a backup sequence of the files to ensure that encryption damage is averted. As threat actors try their best to avoid detection, software restricted policy checks and stops processes associated with ransomware, even before an encryption attempt is made. Completing the ransomware protection is ransomware mode hooking, where Trend Micro engines inspect processes on a deeper level in the operating system, maximizing the scope of security on the runtime layer. Targeted attacks Targeted ransomware attacks uses customized threat packages specific to the company that they are keeping an eye on. In many cases, fileless attacks are utilized to propagate the threat and also to laterally move to an endpoint containing high-value assets. To combat those, behavior monitoring also has extended protection features. Notably, not- to to combat those, zero-day threat protection and enhanced memory scanning help in checking if the encountered file is new and if there are fileless threats that are exploiting your system. When ransomware attacks utilizes these custom tools to disable security, this is where agent self-protection comes into action. prevention protects the exploitation of the security agent and disabling its security features by locking permissions on the core folders. Enhanced with the password, critical core files are protected. Let's check a more advanced detection feature which uses AI to detect threats. So as mentioned with shown by Rodolfo earlier, we have Trend Micro artificial intelligence aiding in our detections. So powered with our cloud intelligence, Trend Micro machine learning identifies good and bad files from a set of unknown files with high accuracy. Custom filters are created so that only the bad files are detected. Machine learning allows for proactive detection. Even if the threat is not yet on our patterns, users are protected from the latest threats. This can be undetected backdoors, new ransomware variants, and polymorphic malware. As mentioned before, ransomware is continuously evolving their tactics by targeting high value assets, meaning they don't want to risk detection. With machine learning and in combination with our cloud intelligence, there are multiple cases where we are successfully able to protect companies from new threat variants and ransomware families by just having this setting enabled on their local agents. So it's not only client devices that needs protecting, but your most important devices also are servers, especially mission critical devices. These devices will oftentimes require protection tailored to a server architecture like deep security. Intrusion prevention and vulnerability protection are host-based IPS solutions. This gives the administrator the power to protect their legacy systems and outdated applications. Deep Security IPS has customized rules for specific ransomware families. They trigger if their behavior is observed on the network, preventing the threat from progressing. Deep Security also has additional network share protection rules to monitor and prevent ransomware activities on the network. Log inspection helps correlate Windows event logs. These events so that we can see them quickly what has happened or what has transpired on the attack. Integrity monitoring monitors for any unexpected changes within your environment. This be registry keys or services or processes, then alerts you immediately. On certain environments, specialized machines are not only meant to do one thing only and not allowed to have other programs installed. So, application control protects single purpose machines from unauthorized software access. This also ensures compliance on multiple endpoints that only your company approved software programs are executed. This security feature also utilizes our Trend Micro Grid database for known safe programs. This will only allow safe programs and programs you specifically choose to run on the environment. So what more can you do to stay on top of ransomware? Ransomware has multiple entry vectors. That is why the best approach to security is a layered defense strategy. Like a fortress which has many walls, dividing each section, we must have security solutions and protocols in place for every layer, from cloud to network to endpoint. We want to protect the user layer as much as we want protection on the exposure layer. With all these platforms, one might think how we can produce usable and meaningful information without the unnecessary noise. Trend Micro XDR, as you've seen earlier, uses a combination of analytics, advanced correlation, and machine learning. Then it provides a full story of the attack. Detections across multiple platforms are correlated and bridged, showing the chain of attack from multiple layers. With XDR, Trend Micro leverages its multiple sensors to deliver a cohesive root cause analysis chain, allowing the admin to isolate and quarantine the source infection endpoint. If you are to recall my slides earlier, remember how I described a layered solution strategy is like a fortress or castle, with each layer has their own protocols in place. However, that's not enough to, let's say, prevent a spy from getting their hands on very classified information. Similarly, in the enterprise, we need such protocols to enforce limitations on what users can access or what privileges can a top management user can have in case that user is compromised. Here are the general security guidelines that we have. So first, we have software limitation. Next is user and system limitation. Next is data recovery. And finally, we have auditing and Active Directory monitoring. So here on software limitation, so granted you have application control, you need to limit and harden your Office suites, patch applications, and harden applications. For user and system limitations, it's crucial that administrators are accounts with administrator privileges are limited and multi-factor authentication is implemented across the board. And also operating system patching is done. For data recovery, recommended is 3-to-1 backup strategy. This not only um, ensures the availability of the data, but also make sure that you have it in case your solutions in-house is destroyed. Then finally, we have auditing and Active Directory monitoring. Then a common misconception of on this setting is that only the servers are monitored. However, that's not the case. We need to monitor both the servers and the clients because as being for as those information Windows events, they are used as evidences linking the threat, the story of the attack. Excuse me. On those sections with logos, there these are trend micro applications that can help you comply with general security recommendations. So next, so be protected. So enable these solutions. So we have behavior monitoring. Excuse me. So we have behavior monitoring. So you need to enable this as it doesn't only protect you with ransomware, but also protects you from zero-day threats and fileless malware. Agent self-protection, you need to enable this to protect your security software from being compromised. Machine learning, if you enabling this allows your systems to be protected from new threat variants and new malware families. Smart scan patterns is not only our most updated patterns, but they have extended protection features as it is connected to the cloud directly. Web reputation and suspicious connection services block threats and uses our active reputation data. This prevents suspicious traffic from going in and out of your computers. Intrusion prevention assists in helping your computers compliant in regards to patches and protecting your legacy systems. Application control prevents unwanted programs and unauthorized software from running on your environment. So in conclusion, ransomware is now shifting to a targeted approach, which traditional security solutions can no longer cover. These attacks are carried out by live threat actors and no longer machines. This is the current reality of ransomware. Starting off from utilizing spam campaigns, now threat groups employ social engineers and penetration experts to successfully enter an enterprise environment. Social engineers gather intel where penetration experts look for loopholes on your network. With threats customized according to the target entity, these threat actors are out to get high value assets in exchange for extortion money, making ransomware attacks a lucrative business in the criminal underground. Okay, thank you for listening. I'll now hand it over to Rodolfo, and we're open now to taking your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. So we will now move to our Q&A and entertain some questions. Is there any question? Yeah. Okay, so would anyone want to ask some questions? Okay, if none, we'll just ask the question for you. So is it safe to enable behavior monitoring? Will it impact our production? So the answer is definitely it is safe to enable the behavior monitoring, but that depends on your environment. So what we recommend is you test it out first on a test machine, and then check if it will affect the performance of the server or the machine where the behavior monitoring is running to. But as we know, there are two issues that are usually being experienced for behavior monitoring, but those can be solved. So one is for the false detection. So for this, our solution would be to either exclude the file or the application being falsely detected on your solution, such as Apex One or Office Scan, and the other is send it to us so that we can whitelist it in our database. Another is if there is performance issue. If there is, what we do here is to debug the product and then make some modifications for the solutions. So another um, is it safe to enable the predictive machine learning? So for predictive machine learning, what we can see here is that there are only false detection, but that is also solved by either excluding it to the detection on the predictive machine learning or sending it to us so that we can whitelist it in our database. And then another question uh, is it safe to enable or is it safe to enable agent self-protection? Definitely, this is needed actually because most of the threat actors nowadays specifically targets the anti-malware solution and then disable them. So if you have the agent self-protection enabled, this can be prevented. And it doesn't have any impact on the performance. So any other questions we have? Okay, so yeah, I think there's no other question. Kate, do you want to end the? Okay, yeah. So this is the end of our webinar presentation. Hope you like it and you learned many things. Have a great day, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, bye.